Sorry. Okay, we're going to roll. Let's pray and then we'll get started. Father, thank you for another week of life. Thank you for opportunities to talk, share, learn, experience new things. Help us tonight and really help me tonight to get us through this material in a clear way with clarity and insight. Give us wisdom together, and may we bless each other just by being together, and may we honor you. We pray in your name. Amen. Okay, we're going to jump back into this. We're going to jump into Christian ethics. Was there any back there? No. I don't know where they went to. How many people don't have packets with them? The packets from last week. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, everything that's on the packet, actually, there's more on the screen than actually in the packet. So let's start looking at ethics. So when Christianity begins to talk about ethics, the basis of ethics is in the teaching of Jesus, which shouldn't surprise us. And specifically, to love God with all of our heart, soul, and mind and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Now, that sounds maybe a little bit basic. Is this mic too loud? No. Okay. It's really loud. Sounds really loud to me. And in the first paragraph there, it says, this kind of love is derived from a Greek word, agape. Agape is a benevolent type of love. It's a love that God has for us. Okay? This is where we get our morality built on two foundational moral absolutes, the love of God and the love of neighbor. And so the way that it works is as you and I become more and more acquainted with and then apply the love that God shows humanity, it changes us. Love does that. When love takes you in, everything changes. Okay? We get things like belonging and a name and a family and purpose and meaning. All of those things come because we are God's, and he acts then as a father to us. So those things happen to us and in us. Then it gets spilled out into, that drives how you and I behave with each other within the church. And then it drives how you and I should behave with those who are outside the body. Okay? It is an agape love. It is a benevolent love. It is a love that's driven by, I have something that I want to give you. I have something that I think you need. I have something that God says I am to share. I am to live within the realm of that and let you watch it, let you see fruits, all of that. And that's all driven by love. God's love in us, and then that love as it gets expressed out into the world. Now, that next little paragraph, it's one sentence. Highlight that, because that's an important one. We ought to speak truth, not because we feel better about it or because it's reasonable, but because God's nature is truth. Okay? Now, that becomes a foundation for all ethics for Christianity. It's truth. Truth helps us decide what's right and wrong. Truth helps us decide what's healthy and not. Truth helps us decide what's wise, what's hurtful, what is good, what is moral. Truth helps us decide that. We ought to pursue justice not because it helps maintain power or because the law commands it, because God is just. So we should be just because God is just. We should be truth tellers because God is a truth teller. The next one, we ought to express mercy not because it will make us happy or because it's our duty, but because God is mercy. So are you catching this? The very thing that drives my ethics, our ethics, should be the character of God. I should not lie. Why? Because he is truth. He's a truth teller. Okay? I should always try to be faithful. Why? Because he tells us he is faithful to all generations. He never changes. So it's that type of thought process when we begin to build an ethic within Christianity. Calvin Lytton, a one-time professor at George Washington, said this. It's not necessarily Christian, but just listen to what he's saying. There is a basic pattern of similarity among ethical codes. Such things as murder, lying, adult, cowardice are, for example, almost always condemned, talking about in a culture. The universality of the ethical sense itself, the oughtness, and the similarities within the code of diverse cultures indicate common moral heritage. Now, I would propose to you that this is part of what God has written on every one of humanity's hearts. I mean, there's passages that talk about God has written eternity on every one of our hearts. Not Christians. That's Old Testament. Every one of our hearts have a sense that there's something more than this. Now, if we will admit that and let it play out in our lives, that's a different thing. But down deep, most people either think or hope that there's got to be more than this, especially in those hopeless, trying times. God's moral character is absolute and unchanging. Okay? God always hates evil, loves good. The Bible is of supreme importance because it tells us the difference between the two. Now, go down to the very last line. Teleological, remember we talked about this? This is argument from design. Okay? This is how most Christians do it. They argue that telling the truth is usually the best. Why? Because that's how God set it up in design. Lying chips away at that. Most of us are married in here, or maybe have been, whatever. How pleasant is it when you lie to your spouse? No, it's not. How pleasant is it when your kids lie to you? Or a boss lies to you? See, it's not pleasant. Why? Because it's really not the way it's designed for us to fully function in a healthy way. For me to fully function in a healthy way, I need to always tell Betty the truth. And I'm going to assume, and I do, that that's what she does back to me. That creates the best design within a marriage. In a family, it's the same thing. Hey, we're all going to try to be truth tellers. And so what you say, we're going to believe, we're going to trust, until we can't. And then when we can't trust, see, then the design starts to fall apart because we're not functioning the way we are designed. Okay? All right. Any questions on ethics? It's a pretty short one there. But it's basically, if you want to know the Christian foundation of ethics, look at the character of God. We should be loving. We should be just. Now, what does just mean? You guys know what just means? What's it mean? Okay. Okay, it is. And many of us use the two terms fair and just in the same way. Here's why you don't want to do that. Let's say we're sitting in class, and Dave and Jason, you guys are sitting right next to each other, and you're talking, and I'm teaching, and I turn around and I hear some stuff, and I said, next time you guys are talking, you're going to the principal. I turn around, and Dave talks again, and you don't. And when I turn around, do you want justice or fairness? Here's why that's important. If it's fair, if you're okay with fairness, I send both of you. That's fair, that's equal, okay? But you weren't talking, right? Justice has to do with the one who did the sin. Now, Dave, if you guys are both 16 again, Dave's loving fairness because he's guilty. But you don't like it because you're innocent. You don't want fairness. You want justice. Well, it isn't, but you should care more about justice because justice, only he goes. You're off the hook because you didn't do anything that time. You were probably guilty some other times. But, okay. Well, most likely that's not justice then, because he can't dish out something for something that he did or didn't do. Okay? And you're over here smiling because you know that, hey, I'd rather have a guy go in there and get spanked with me. You can tell how old I am now, okay? Because we got spanked at school all the time, and I deserved every one of them. So there's a difference. Fairness usually is the equality issue. Justice is doing what is right. Fairness usually never sets anybody free. Justice sets you free. And it gets the right one who should get punished. Okay? So justice and fairness, in some ways, those are both part of our ethics. But what needs to run our ethics is justice. Okay? But just remember, if you're wrestling with any kind of ethical decision, start at the character of God. Now, we used to have the bracelets, what would Jesus do? And they're okay, but you have to know what Jesus would do. Because you could look at it all day long, and if you don't know what Jesus would do, it doesn't help you. So start with the character of God. Is what I'm doing right? Just. And you can add things like, is it loving? Is it merciful? Is it gracious? Is it compassionate? Is what I'm doing going to build faithfulness, maybe, if it's in an issue of relationship? What about the character of God is going to be displayed in my decision-making or behavior at any moment? Now, that sounds like it's a lot of stuff to weigh. Sometimes it is, but sometimes you and I are living in a world where we have to make that decision like this. Okay? But here's what I'll tell you. The longer you spend in the Word of God, and the longer you spend with the character of God, it's just like with your spouses. The longer you spend time with them, you should know them more. And if you don't, then you need to start spending more time learning about each other. But the longer I spend with God, the more I'm going to know about his character. And one of the big things that will do, it opens me up to having the Spirit actually sometimes interceding in me prior to an ethical decision. And all of a sudden, it's like, boy, that was a no-brainer. This one has happened to me. I don't know if God, over the years, thinks I have a problem with money or not. But has this ever happened to you? You go cash register, and it happens less and less because these kids can't count money. But most people can't count money anymore because we don't hardly use it. But, when I used to use cash, they'd give me stuff back. I'd always watch it. And then I'd not move my hand. And I'd say, you need to count that again. And they'd count it, and they'd realize, oh, they gave me too much money. Now, I could easily go, oh, how many times have they shorted me? You see that? So I'm just going for fairness. But it blows them away when they actually go, oh, yeah, thank you for that. You know what verse drives that for me? It has for 30 years. God hates what? You guys know it? Dishonest gain. It's one verse in the Bible that has helped me, or God has used it with me, to dictate some of my ethics. Because I'm not just giving the $10 that they paid me back to Hy-Vee. I'm showing care for that kid. I mean, when I was a kid and you ran a till, if you were short at the end of the day, they took it out of your wages. Now, they don't do that anymore, but still the point is made. It's a biblical thing about God that's driving an ethic there. And that's what should happen in all of our ethics. All right, any questions on ethics? All right, let's jump to an easy one, biology. Okay. In Christianity, everything starts with, back to, in the beginning, God. Okay? So that's where we start, even in our biology. In the beginning, God. Now, our theology affects our science. Now, that is true for every group we're going to look at. Okay? And this is true for believers and unbelievers. Most people, even scientists, turn their minds to God when trying to answer the question of how life arose. Sir Arthur Eddington, the man who explained Einstein's theory of relativity to the general public, said this: "In the mystic sense of the creation around us, in the expression of art, in a yearning towards God, the soul grows upward and implanted in its nature. The sanction of this development is within us, a striving born with our consciousness, or an inner light proceeding from a great power than ours. Science can scarcely question this sanction. For the pursuit of science springs from a striving the mind is impelled to follow." Okay, have you ever found yourself just asking a question, you're like, where'd that come from? How many of you are really inquisitive? Are you? Okay. I would say that is a God-given design in us. Because it's with the questions that drives us forward. If we're wise, we'll drive forward and enter in to find answers. Okay? That's what science is. Science is looking for answers to questions that people ask. And as we go on, new questions. I mean, Dustin and I were messing around with the computers and that, and I said to him, Sean was running all the system from home. And I'm like, is it absolutely amazing what we can do with technology? But if you go in my truck, I still got 7 notepads going for different lists and stuff. But it's the inquisitive part of us that always drives us to try to figure out more about something. And that's really what science is. Now, Christianity starts with, in the beginning, there was a creator, and that creator created. Okay? Now, here are 5 reasons for a creator. So this you could use as part of your apologetic if you're ever talking with somebody who might not believe in a creator or doesn't know, which is what we call an agnostic. Here's some reasons. We know from science that life comes only from living matter. Okay? That's why most Christians will struggle with spontaneous generation. We talked about that term last week. Spontaneous generation is the term that life, as we know it, sprang from non-living matter. That could have been a rock, could have been dust, could have been water if water is really not living. Okay, that's what that idea means. Spontaneous generation is not the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the idea that at one point this all started. Okay, so those two things are not the same. Big Bang does not automatically mean atheistic life springing from non-living matter. Okay, it just means that at some point this all started. Okay? Now, second one is random chance processes do not produce intelligible information. Let me tie that together with 4, okay? Because there's a term here, if you don't know it, you really should know it. Living organisms give the appearance of design, okay? So again, it's teleological. When we look at stuff, and when science looks at stuff, the closer and closer and closer, and the deeper and deeper and deeper they look at things, they see the term here, irreducible complexity. Let me move this along here for you. Okay. Irreducible complexity means the deeper and the further back we go, the more detailed we get. Evolution says we start basic and we evolve into this detail. Now, one of the problems that evolutionary theory is having today is trying to deal with DNA. Because the smaller we have taken the human body, we have come onto this idea that the smaller we get, the more complex it gets. It doesn't start basic and get more complex. It gets more complex as we go into it. Okay? We don't have a ton of time to go into that. But random processes do not produce DNA. DNA is a process that has to, right there, 100% it has to exist and function. It can't evolve into functioning. It either functions or it doesn't. Lots of, what's the name of that group out of Colorado that does a lot on intelligent design? You remember? Davis Institute or something like that? But this is an unbelievable, strong debate point on behalf of the church with people who might not believe in a creator or line up more on the evolutionary scheme of things, is to just talk about the science. This isn't Christian science that has found this. This is secular and both Christian who have found this idea that the smaller we take the design of the creation, the more detail we find. And the detail has to be functioning from the get-go, or the living species doesn't function. 3, the immaterial world is real. Okay. Had a conversation with an electrician at a job site today, my son and I, and he said his reason for coming to Christ, he goes to Open Door up in Robbinsdale, but one of the reasons he came to Christ was because somebody was able to convince him that he had a spirit, that he had a soul. And that whole dynamic of, you mean I'm not just an animal or just a piece of this creation. I mean, he was talking to us how at one point in his life, I saw no difference between me and a rock. I was born, I in the ground, and I'll turn to dust. And that's it. And that's what you get if you don't buy into a purpose and meaning, and given a spirit and soul part, the immaterial, the supernatural part that we talked about last week. And then 5 is scientists are bailing on the theory of evolution as currently constructed. I read to you last week from Stephen Gould, a Harvard paleontologist, who said, yeah, if my choices are a creator and a theory that doesn't work, I'm going with the theory every time. Now you have to understand, that's not science. That's philosophy. He's not accepting science, he's rejecting the supernatural. And if you do that, you're stuck with this. Okay, so that's not even really a choice anymore. You're just rejecting one, so you get stuck with the other. Okay, any questions on that? Anything? All right, let's look at psychology then. So we have come down that in the beginning, God created, gave us purpose, meaning, a soul. What does it really mean to be human? This is psychology, it's the study of the mind. Okay? Christian psychology begins with personhood, if you want to highlight that. God is a person, and Christianity says our personhood is somehow related to this. Now, Alvin Plantinga, a good CRC guy, Dutch guy, who used to be head of the philosophy department at Notre Dame. I don't know if he's still there. He says the first point to note is that in the Christian scheme of things, God is the premier person, the first and chief exemplar of personhood. And the properties most important for an understanding of our personhood are the properties that we share with him. J.P. Moreland, who is another dynamic philosophy teacher, he's out of Denver, says human beings are composed of an immaterial entity, a soul, a life principle, a ground of sentence, and a body. More specifically, a human being is the unity of two distinct entities, body and soul. So, because we believe in both of those, we are what are called dualists. We believe in two parts. If I'm atheistic, I'm monistic, because I only believe in the material. Okay, I'm going to go back to the circles here for a minute from last week. If I am a spiritualist, I'm also monistic, because I only believe in the spiritual. This stuff doesn't exist. Okay? But in Christianity, because we believe in the supernatural, that God has stepped into the natural that he has created, we live in a dualistic world. Okay? So it says only Christianity, with its emphasis on the spiritual and the understanding of man's fallen condition, can truly address the inner concerns of the individual. Now, highlight that or package that away. Christianity is the only group that's going to come to you and say, as Jeremiah 17:9 says, you are a dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrel. Your heart is so deceitful that no one but him can understand it. How many of you in the last year have looked and seen something and go, how could somebody do that? What was it? What happened? Betty, what were you showing me? Oh, this guy in the clinic. Where was that, Buffalo? Was it yesterday? How does a 67-year-old guy do that? Just take people's lives. Do you ever just look at your world sometimes and go, I can't figure out. I mean, Betty and I do this a lot. I'm like, I used to have anger and stuff like that when I was a kid and stuff like that. I would have never, ever thought to take somebody's life because they made me mad. Or they cut me off on the road. Or you fill in the blanks. Okay. Christianity alone says, I know why that happens. Because apart from God, I'm a dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrel. There was not one day, and I would make the bet that you guys are in this with me. There's not one day I would ever dare to go, okay, God, I had a good one here. You got to let me in. Okay? There's not one. So Christianity understands this. So when God does something on our behalf, the term amazing in grace. See, grace blows us away. But this kind of grace blows us away. Have you ever had somebody in the human plane forgive you of something that you did that was bad? Can you take yourself there and feel that? Some freedom, this person, whatever you felt, okay? Of grace. Now, what's interesting is we live in a world today that almost expects grace, but they expect no cost of grace because we're really not that bad. And the more that the church buys into that and doesn't preach about separation from God, sin, eternal death, eternal separation from God, the more that we don't talk about those things, the less grace is needed. And so what happens is the world, like, well, it wasn't that big a deal. Well, they believe in the natural. They don't know anything about a spiritual consequence. And so it's a wonderful thing that you and I have to share to people this way. So it says here, Christian psychology helps people get in touch with their real selves only because it allows them to recognize their sinfulness and consequently their need. Highlight this next sentence. Our greatest need, let's see here. I want to find this for everybody. Yeah. Our greatest need is not self-esteem. Our education system is built in that. So we won't say anything bad about anybody because it hurt their self-esteem. Okay? It's the realization that we are sinners in rebellion against God. Now, I've been reading some articles on the difference between the gospel and salvation. Two different Greek words. The good news is good news. And it's good news for everybody. And it's good news for the creation. This creation that Romans tells us that is groaning for the day that it's going to be redeemed. Just like believers in the New Testament. But good news, everybody can get the effects of it. Let's say every Christian, let's just do America. Every Christian in America, we begin to do 100%, whatever that means. Recycling, no littering, we clean up, we do it. What do you think the effect on this country would be? You think it would change? Would it affect this country? Because we're called to do that, right? We're called to take care of God's creation. That's part of the good news. We were given dominion over it. I think Pastor talked about this Sunday. We were given dominion over it. But we're also called to take care of it. That's good news for everybody, if you're a believer or not. But there's a part of the good news that ultimately gets to what we call soteriology, salvation. I can do all sorts of good news stuff and never share Jesus. But at some point, we have to share why and because of whom do we do those things. I remember my dad one time. I was married, probably late 20s. We were sitting, and I don't know how we got in a conversation, but he said, I prayed for you guys, and I read the scriptures every day. I would get up and go into the bathroom so I wouldn't wake your mom up. And I did this. And I said, you know what, Dad, that did us no good. We never saw it. I need to see what he was making you do. And I said to him, and at some point, you have to share with me why you are doing that. I need the good news, but I also need why. Why are you good? Dave, you're a nice guy. Why are you good? At some point, we have to share why we're good. Jesus makes me this way. Why do I try to be a good dad and a husband and grandpa? Why? Not because I'm a nice guy. Because I do have, I look like I'm maybe outgoing, but man, if I could sit in a room and read books for the rest of my life and never be around people. Are you with me?
I can see that feel, yeah. Like anything, if you actually had the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm sure you.
But the reason that I try to go out of my way to do these things is because I know what love did in my life. I know what love will do to somebody else. I know what trying to be graceful. I know what trying to try to do my best to live a life that somebody may want to emulate. Now, do you know where I get that? Same place you guys should. Apostle Paul says it how many times? Be imitators of me. Holy cow. That's an amazing thing that he says that numerous times. Because he's saying, do what I do. I mean, what kind of work has God got to do in you to get you to a place that Paul could do that? This is a guy that a few years before, they were throwing the blankets and their coats at his feet as they stoned Stephen. And now this guy, 7-10 years later, is going, be like me. See, that's an amazing thing. That's what grace does. Grace changes you. And that's the story, again, that you and I have. Now, in terms of trying to present this kind of argument, you don't want to go have a coffee with somebody and say, hey, I just need to let you know you're a dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrel. Now, that's true. but that's not going to be accepted. But if you place your story in the midst of his story and say, you know what's amazing though is I used to be the same way. And this is how God fixed me. And then you're in with your story. So this is about with the world. But you have to have some tact on getting into it. So Christianity starts off, says Kilpatrick, by saying that we're not okay the way. Move that over there. A twist in our natures. And the twist is not removed by liking yourself, but it's by starting to live in Christ. Only after receiving Christ as Savior can people begin to understand their value as creations in God's image. That changes everything. And again, this is a point that you probably have heard me hype a lot. When you understand yourself as a child of God, as a fully forgiven child of God, performance ends. And if I could give any of you a present above everything else that comes because of Jesus, it would be freedom. Because freedom does two things. It sets me apart and sets me free from keeping lists, trying to make sure I measure up to God. It frees me from all that. And once I'm done with that, I now can be free for you. I can be free to love you guys in a way that I might not even know right now. And you know what? It doesn't matter because I'm free. If it works or if it doesn't matter. I'm free. My relationship with God is not dictated by if I have success with you or not. It's dictated by, and go back to ethics. Am I being just? Am I being loving? Am I being merciful? Am I being gracious? Am I being long-suffering? Am I being compassionate? See, if people see you as that, when you go, oh man, I don't think he should have done that. See, they will accept that. Why? Because they trust my character. They know I love them. They know I care for them. You know, I've got a boy and a son-in-law working for me now. We're now partners in my company. And things have changed over the years. Because when I first used to, hey, hit that concrete in that area a little bit more. Because of their experience with me and with the business, they took that personal. So they went right to, oh, I didn't do it well enough. No, that's not what I was saying. I want to help you reach some excellence. So just hit that a little bit more. And when you see what I'm talking about, when you get there, you're going to go, oh, man. And see, then you gain confidence, even though it came in the form of a critique. But it's only accepted if they can buy into my motivation for critiquing them. So if I say to you, Todd, dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrel, get out of here. I don't ever want to see you again. Okay? Sit down. Okay. See, that portrays just ignorance, arrogance, stupid, mean, unloving, all of that. And that's what he should get out of that. And he should get up and walk out because I have done that. But if Todd and I have a relationship and we've talked about stuff and he knows my heart and da-da-da, and then I say, Todd, you shouldn't have done that, I don't think. Can we talk about it? He will accept that totally different. And it's not anything about him. It's about what have I presented to the world that, again, would earn me the right to even share with them or earn the right to even say, hey, you know, I think there's a better way to do that. Okay? How many of you have ever had the same conversation with a kid, maybe a couple days apart, and you've had it two different ways? And you got, it was the same conversation, but it was done two different ways, and you got two different results out of it. That's what I'm talking about. How's that go? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's got a lot of truth to it. There's some kernels of truth in that. Okay? But people will accept our story if they believe that we really, really love God and then love our neighbors. Witnessing or sharing your life or evangelism, whatever you want to call it, can't be about numbers. Because Jesus wasn't about numbers. If he was about numbers, he would have done it way differently. He would have done it like Billy Graham. The way Jesus did it, he did it in multiplication. So I'm gonna share with you two and disciple you two, and then you two are gonna go get a couple more, and I'm gonna go get a couple more, and then those people, they're gonna get each a couple. See, and at one point in the 90s, multiplication would have made the world, if we did it, multiplication would have made the world Christian in 14 years. Did you know that Billy Graham, if he did a crusade every day, would not keep up with world population? It's just addition. It's not multiplication. And so that's what you and I are given our gifts for. It's to share them. Do you ever look at the gifts in the Scriptures? The Scriptures tell us that every time somebody becomes a believer, they get at least a gift. The Spirit gifts them. None of my gifts are for me. None of your gifts are for you. They're for other people. First of all, the edification of the church. That's what we're doing here. We're just learning, we're sharing, we're talking, we're being edified, we're being given skills, okay? That's edification. That's one of the things every time. Judy just gave me a spiritual gift the other day, and it was top one. Teaching and edification. I could be in an empty room and do it. It does no good. My gifts are no good unless you are here. Your gifts are no good unless they're given to other people. That's how the Spirit builds that unity within us. Now then, when we get strong and unified and we walk out these doors and we're all sharing our gifts, boy, what an amazing thing God has designed. And it's all driven on the idea of personhood and that we have his image. And so when we walk out these doors or we're on calls with people at work, we understand that I know how to do this because I know how God does with me. I can be patient and long-suffering and be gracious and merciful, even if somebody deserves to be cracked on the head because of something they did or didn't do. But that will blow. They expect a crack on the head. What amazes them? Grace. Same thing that amazes you and me. Okay, flip over there. Let's talk about sociology. So psychology is the individual mind. Sociology is the study of the community. And I put these in the wrong order. These should read home, church, state. Okay, that's the way they should read. The home is the central figure in community for God. And then it branches when you get a few homes together and they form a church, then you have church. And then when you have many, many communities, typically states are formed. Now, do any of you know who Tocqueville was? Alexis de Tocqueville? He was a French guy that the French sent over here in the early 1800s to study what they called the experiment, because that's what America was in the beginning, because nobody knew if this thing was going to function or not. He had some amazing things to say about society. In a book, Democracy in America, he was impressed with America, but he was still sober for this fact. Strong societies often collapse if people lose the will to maintain them. Now, one of the things that really blew him away was all sorts of different people could live next door to each other and not kill each other. Now, it is true at that point, he was mainly talking about denominationally. The Methodists and the Anabaptists could get along, and Episcopals and whatever. Because see, where they came from, that didn't happen. Everybody had to be whatever the king wanted. So here there was some freedom, and the people actually kind of were able to make this society work. But look at the italicized there. Because Roman civilization perished through barbarian invasions, we are perhaps too much inclined to think that this is the only way a civilization can die. Am I getting this for you guys? Yeah. Okay. If the lights that guide us ever go out, they will fade little by little. Just think about that in terms of our own America right now. As if of their own accord. So the things that begin to fade, they're not being pressured from the outside world. We're doing them inside. If you study the 5 big civilizations, none of them died by invaders. They ate themselves out from the inside. Okay? Typically, things with women and children were at the center of sexual perversions. It says, we therefore should not console ourselves by thinking that the barbarians are a long way off. Some peoples may let the torch be snatched from their hands. Others will stamp it out themselves. Okay? Now, there is a biblical principle here. Remember your chains that once held you. Okay? You and I should never forget what we have been saved from. We should never forget it. But remember your chains are gone. Okay? Remember what we once were. Paul says that a lot. Remember when you were once off and afar from God? Remember when you were just like all the other Gentiles? Remember, but you are no longer this way. Tocqueville's saying many civilizations just forget, and stuff just kind of creeps in, okay? And then the next thing you know, you go, how did we get here? Well, how do you eat an elephant? A little bit at a time. And then you turn around and you go, holy moly. Christian psychology is based on the proposition that both the individual and social order are important to God, mankind, and society. Okay? I would highlight that if you got your packet. Christ died and rose again for each person as an individual. Are we still here? Yep, okay. God also ordained social institutions to teach love, respect, discipline, work, and community. Okay. Those are things that we all should be teaching each other and our children. Family, church, and state are the 3 most important of these. Christian psychology focuses both on a society as a means for human cooperation in accordance with God's will, and on the individual as a vital, important part of various social institutions. Okay, now highlight this or write it down. Sphere sovereignty. This is an important issue. It's the belief that God ordained certain spheres of society, such as family, church, and state, and that society functions best when the sphere is properly functioning. So again, for the Christian, it goes back to, in the beginning, God created people and then created society with some design. And society best functions when that design is followed. Okay? And as we look in the next few weeks, what we're going to see is other philosophies that don't chip away at stuff that's out there. They chip away at God's design. And so therefore we look around and we go, and it is logical, if you get rid of this, this is going to come. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you treat people this way, this is your response you're going to get. Okay? It's design. That's the way most of us live our life. We live our life by time and design and order. Okay? So, implications of sphere sovereignty. Here's some of them. And the idea of how we are to live in unity with each other. We are image bearers of God. Now again, that's another profound thing. You could talk for a long, long time on that. Do you really understand that? Here, let me put you on the spot here. How many here would say that they are believers in Jesus? Okay. You cannot not be an image bearer of God. If you do it well or if you do it bad, you have been an image bearer. And you have just sent a message to the world. Now, it may sound a little harsh, but that's exactly how God designed it. Do you know Jesus, when he told the disciples, hey, it's better for me to go. What do you mean? It can't be get any better than this. Oh, yeah. Because if I'm in Jerusalem, I'm not in Nazareth. Or I'm not in Europe. Or I'm not in whatever this place was back then. But if my Father sends the Comforter and the Spirit, I can now be in every one of these believers. Jesus has just expanded himself. I think this is one of the things where Jesus talks about, you'll do greater things. This means you'll have the Spirit every place. I can just be with you whatever room we're in. See? But you and I are image bearers. We cannot get away from that. How many of you ever said something like this to your kids? You got to kind of have older kids, I guess. Don't you know you're a reflection on this family? My mom used to say it every time I went out of the house. Change your clothes. Don't you know you're a reflection on me? Yes, Mom. Okay. Then halfway to the bus stop, I changed my clothes that I had in my gym bag. Okay. You and I are image bearers. That's the way God designed it. Another one is the importance of the individual as a social being. Look at social media. The explosion of people trying to communicate, which doesn't work on that mode, I would say, most of the time. But we are starved for social interaction. Now, I just listened to about 2 hours worth of the effects of the COVID stuff and no school on kids. Have any of you had access to this stuff? We are meant to be with people. And when we aren't, we're in trouble. That's probably mostly why I'm not in a room reading books all by myself. Okay? Because we're meant for each other. The embrace of human value. People are killing themselves at an alarming rate. The top 2 reasons, hopelessness, and nobody loves me. I have no value to anybody. Have any of you ever felt that? There's some of you shaking your heads. You know what? There's people out there that need to listen to your story. Because if you feel loved and important now, you've got the story for that one out there who's not feeling valued. See, your grace that God's given you and your gift, give it away. Don't hoard it. Because somebody's dying to hear your story about how God gave you value. Recognition of both the individual and the society. Proper balance between institutions of family, church, and state. An ennobling perspective on government. A love for the family and a proper role for the church. Okay, let's combine law with this one, because as we talk about government and stuff. Cicero said, we are slaves of the law so that we may be free. Okay. Now, he was just a Roman statesman, politician, whatever you want to call him. But think about that idea. We are slaves of the law so that we may be free. What does that sound like? Oh, okay, you beat me to that. But doesn't that sound a little contradictory? Because I want to be free, so I'm going to have all these laws. Okay. The wise person understands that. It's like any sport that you can play. It's all got rules, designed. And it's meant to be played a certain way. And when it's played within those rules, holy cow, there's great freedom. I can anticipate what you're going to do on a basketball court. I know what I can do. I'm going to assume that you're going to follow the rules. So it just frees us up. I know that I can go up and take any shot, and that for the most part you're going to try not to foul me. But if you do, the rules are going to get you. So see, I'm still free to play. You can do that with football. You can do it with soccer. You can do it with anything. And the day that you come to understand that the law of God does the very same thing. God says one man, one woman for a lifetime. If you do that, the benefits are unbelievable. Okay? Why? Because it was designed that way. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, so you that may have a long life. Now, did any of your dads ever say, I brought you into this world, I could take you out? God said that first. Obey me so that you will live a long life. Because if you don't, the inverse would be true. If you don't obey, it could be quickened. Okay? But the laws give us order, and it frees us all up how to... When I walk in here on a Sunday morning, I assume the ones that I know that are believers, I assume certain things out of them, and I don't assume other things. Do you guys ever think about that? You guys should assume things out of me. I get to preach again on the 28th. You should have a long list of things that you assume I will not do. Was it Jeremiah that preached a sermon? I think it was Jeremiah that preached a sermon, laying naked out on the altar. Is that Jeremiah? I think it was Jeremiah. How would you feel if you walked in here Sunday morning, I walked into a robe, I crawled up here and disrobed? You guys assume I wouldn't do that. Don't challenge me. No. See, we based upon order and the rules, we rely on things from each other. And it keeps us free. It keeps us, I don't know if happy is the right word, but it keeps us content. That's what order does. Okay? It is a human paradox that to be free, we must abide by laws that constrain our freedom. See, it's like freedom of speech. Do we really have freedom of speech? Well, yes, according to the framers of the Constitution. Unless I invalidate the right of somebody else. Now, we have very few rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The rights are, I have rights because I exist. And you have the exact same ones. Anything else is preferential treatment. You and I have the exact same rights. Okay? Life, you can never, by God's rules, you can never impinge on my life. You don't have the right to do that. God says, vengeance is mine. You have no right to my life. I have no right to your life. If we both do that, we win. Okay? Liberty. I'm free. And I'm free as long as I don't infringe on you. As soon as I infringe on your rights, I'm no longer living liberty because I've taken something away from you. Okay? And I can pursue happiness. Doesn't mean I'm ever going to get it. It just says I can pursue it however I want, except I can't infringe on any of your rights. I can't take away your life, liberty, or your pursuit of happiness. Okay? Now, because God is beyond us, God's character forms the enduring definition of all that is good. Because he is with us, his law applies to all people, all places, all time. That's the absoluteness. So somebody in 1950 can't go, well, it was way harder for us. God loosened up his rules for my grandkids. No, he didn't do that. We just don't pay attention to him anymore. Okay? All places, all people, all times. Christ, God gave us divine laws. Christians, I should say, believe God gave us divine laws and the meaning of discovering them. Okay? Here's another thing with being just. God has never, and this is why it's important, going back to our source, has a God figure talked with us, communicated with us. If he has, then he can hold us accountable. if he hasn't communicated certain things to us and then tries to hold me accountable to him, that's not just. Okay? So it's the same thing when you and I parent. We should make sure we have just laws and just things. Why? Because with law comes the idea that I should be able to understand them and follow them. Otherwise, it kind of feels like God's playing around a little bit with me. Okay? So Christian law consists of 6 basic principles. Where do we got to go here? Sorry about that. One more. There we go. The source of divine law is the character and nature of God. We've already talked about that. The moral order proceeds from and reflects the character of God. So everything in our psychology and sociology, you and I should be doing the image bearing with each other in community and sociology, and then with the world. We are created in God's image and thus significant. Now, some people will say, there's got to be more than that. No, we have created that I have to have lists and lists and lists of stuff of why I'm important to you. Betty and I, we try to remind each other, I loved you just because I love you. I have chosen to love you. I somewhat fell in love, but that's not what keeps me with her. I have chosen to love her, and I made a commitment to her. That's what you and I get from God. I have created you, I have chosen you, and I love you. And somehow that's not enough for us. And I tell you, it's not enough for the world right now. They are constantly looking for more. I had a great dad. I was 10 years old when he became a Christian. But he was still a good dad. But after that, I don't ever remember going to bed once in my life, even when we would go back and visit, that he didn't say, I love you, you're my boy, yes, I know you're 32, but you're my boy, I love you. And it was enough for me. We really started in earnest on this flip house we bought today. And I got Mitch and Josh together, and we stood in the dining room and we prayed over the house and our business. And I got done, and I said amen, and I said, you guys know I just absolutely love you. Now, I have no idea what they did with that. I don't really care. But it was true, and that was enough. So when God says that to us, I love you, you are valued, we don't need any more. I don't need validation from Betty any more than what God gave me, or from you guys, or from my kids. That should be enough for us, that God loves us. Now, we possess a nature that is in rebellion against him. Now, he loves the daylights out of us, but we're dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrels because we've sinned against him. Then God the Creator became God, the Redeemer, by taking on the very human form he had created. I love you. You're enough. You're in rebellion against me because of your sin, and you can't fix it, so I'm going to. And then he fixes it. And if we partake in the grace and accept it and apply it to our lives, it's a gift. You ever given a gift to somebody and they didn't receive it? Not everybody receives it. It's for everybody, but not everybody takes it. And then finally, God will judge the whole human race through Christ according to his standard of good and evil. So divine law is eternal because God is eternal. It's so eternal and permanent that someday God will use it to judge the world in a judgment based on natural and revealed law. God established a human government and a rule of law primarily to keep man's sinful impulses in check. Because of the fall, human history reflects a continuing effort by men to substitute man-made laws for God's laws. Okay. I had a conversation with a wedding planner today who called me and asked, She's got a couple that's looking for premarital counseling and then wedding ceremony in September. And my first question was, do they want a religious, spiritual wedding, or just, kind of a law wedding, civil wedding, whatever you want to call them? And she says, you know what? I'm really unsure because we've just kind of met, but I'm meeting with them tomorrow. I said, well, make that one of your major points. I will do either, but I love doing God weddings because I get to evangelize. Okay, someday most people are going to come in contact with someone that can help them with this impulse of the nature. It may be me, it may be you. But the idea of a class like this is that we're ready. That if somebody asks, as Peter says, if somebody asks for a defense of the hope that lies within you, you are like, that's all I needed, one question. That electrician came in today and asked kind of one question, and, well, Josh wasn't there, but my son was there, and just sat there and listened to us talk for a half hour. He's here to give me a bid on electric, and we spent a half hour talking about Jesus. He asked a question. I didn't bring it up. But I'll talk about it if he asks me a question. This is the second job. This guy loves working for us, loves talking with us. But one day, everybody's going to have to give an account to this dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrel that's in there. And God has allowed you and I to be part of that. We talked about rights already. Okay, let's go and do politics. Okay. Politics is not the idea of politics. It's the idea of how I see governing authorities over me. Okay? Could be mom and dad. It could be Pastor Dave. It could be husband. What's that? Boss. Yep. Teacher. Anything like that. Okay? Power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way. Politics seeks to answer this question. What is the best way to use power in order to organize the community for its citizens? So that's what Christianity should be asking, okay? Not just to get power, but to get power to enhance people's lives. Okay? Properly conceived, politics offers a platform for which to encourage virtue, and virtue is at the heart of good government. Edmund Burke said this, "What is liberty without wisdom and without virtue?" I had this conversation with someone early this morning. What good, I actually, without regard to this, I said, what good is that knowledge if you don't use it with wisdom? And then there was just silence. Okay. What is liberty without wisdom and virtue? It is the greatest of all possible evils, for it is folly, vice, and madness without tuition or restraint. Okay. Now, without getting into politics, look at our world today. We have tried to take the laws off of freedom. We have tried to redesign God's order, sociologically and things. And then we have tried by power to not influence. And most countries are doing this. By their power, they demand. They don't just influence. Okay, and you'll really see that when we get to the Marxist Lenin stuff. Christianity says citizens of the kingdom of heaven should be the best citizens in the kingdom of the world because their allegiance is to something higher. Go back to the green stuff I was talking about, littering and all that. Nobody should have to tell me that. Nobody should have to tell me to take care of this world. Why? Because it's not mine. I am a steward. Patrick prayed Sunday, Lord, accept our gifts. We're just giving back to you what is yours. I've heard that 1,000,000 times in my life as a churchgoer. I wonder if we really believe that. We should start making baskets, if we really believe it, making baskets that we can just crawl into. Because everything I am is yours. Everything is his, and we answer to him. We don't answer to the rules of the United States on green movement. We should be at the forefront of this. Now, I'm not saying everything, okay? I'm just saying that taking care as a steward of this world, that should be a big thing for me. It's his. He's given us stewardship over it, and he will hold us accountable for how we live. The Christian worldview sees government as an institution God established to promote security and justice, protect the innocent, and secure rights that God has granted to people. So all those rights that we've talked about before. We should be standing up for those, for each other. And outside in this world, that's part of the good news. Might not have anything to do with salvation right this day, but I can stand up for people's rights and justice and life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. That's part of good news. That's why the church is here, to be able to do that. So, we're not going to talk about which one is right or wrong, but here are the big 5 views from Christians on political involvement. The first one is Christians should not be involved. Pretty self-explanatory. Second one, some people say society is not worth redeeming. It's just feeling the effects of the fall, and the world is just being the world, so I just kind of let it go. It shouldn't bother me. The worse the world gets, the closer Jesus is to coming, some of them will say. Okay? 3, political structures can't change the human heart. That's true. But what do we really mean? Is that just an excuse to stay out of involvement? You know, I don't know. 4, Christianity is only about the institution of the church and is not relevant to civil government. Okay? I've met people that believe that. And then 5, Christians should be involved and they should try to take over. Now, I believe that there probably should be a 6th one. I don't know where it ends up on this list in terms of surveys, but Christians should be involved, but try to work within it. I don't know. That just seems like a common sense. If 5 is viable, then the one I just shared, I think, is probably viable. What do you guys think about those? You know people that have one of those views? What do you think is the overall view of Bridgewood? It's politics. No one's talking. They don't talk about politics and religion in Minnesota, huh? Okay. I'll let you. Would you start? Number 6? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Let me say one thing about this. Yep. Oh, yeah. Okay, this is how I build my argument when I've asked that, and I'm asked that a lot. First of all, based upon some dynamics of Christianity, Christianity is, God did not ever expect to be a theocracy. Okay? Because compulsion is one of the number one things that I think we're going to skip Islam, but it is one of the number one things in Islam. Compulsion. You have to. And that's why many of the hadiths, the sayings of Muhammad, the Quran, and some of the other documents are so harsh on if you don't, and then fill in the blank. So I start out this. Number one, I don't think God ever wanted a theocracy because it's forced. I have read almost every primary document for our founders over the years of teaching this stuff for 25 years, and it's not there. None of them wanted a theocracy. Just think about it this way. What did they come from? You got one choice. And if you're not, we're going to prison, burn you at the stake, do whatever we can to you. That's what our framers came from. They would never go back to it. They risked their lives of them, their families, friends, everybody, to get over here and have freedom of religion. And maybe it did in the beginning. It meant, yeah, you can be a Baptist, I'll be a Methodist, you be a Presbyterian, I'll be Episcopal. That was part of the freedom they were looking for. Okay? So I don't think God ever intends for us to be a theocracy. Plus, Christianity is one of the few religions that is not tied to any political system. You could take me and put me into any political system, and I could live my life as a Christian. Now, there may be consequences, but nothing can stop me from living my life as a believer. So I think, when I read the framers, these guys there were different variations of, quote, theology involved in it. But these guys believed in a few things. God created this. God gave design and order and rights to us to protect me, but also to protect you. And so I think that we need more believers involved in politics, just living as believers. I'm not there with an agenda. I'm not there to make Savage a Christian city. God doesn't work that way. But does God put people in political systems? What did he do with Joseph? Joseph saved millions and millions of people, and he saved the Hebrew people from extinction. All because he got into politics God's way. I don't think Joseph was looking for it. Hey, guys, throw me in a well and sell me to the slave traders. That'll save us Jews. No, I don't think. Most of the time we don't know what God's got for us. But I think what a better witness. Could you imagine, and I don't want to sound judging here, but could you imagine somebody really getting up in the Senate completely free from influence? See, we can't even imagine that, right? Completely free from lobbyists, completely free, just free in Christ, and just getting up and joyfully sharing. Okay? Now, as soon as I say that, most of you are going to go, oh, they'll get killed, they'll get slaughtered, they'll get... You don't know that. Joseph refused to bow to Potiphar's wife, gets thrown in jail, and ends up number 2 in Egypt. None of us write that story. Only God does. Okay? So we don't know about our influence and our impact on people. So I'm skeptical about our political organization in America, but there's not a better one on the face of the earth right now. When Tocqueville, if you read more Tocqueville, he's like, that Constitution is divine. There's just something different about it. That's the reason why, 200 and some years old? The French change it about every 3 years, don't they? They change it on a whim, but there's something different about the design of our Constitution and stuff. It's not a divine document. I'm not saying that. But there's just something you can see where the framers took God's characters and put this human document together based on it. Order, design, life, liberty. You can see those things. So I have no trouble with people being involved in politics. I don't know if it's the best way. It wouldn't, for me, I'll speak for me. It's not the best way for me to have impact. Pastor Dave and Judy and I have talked about this a lot. I've shared with them numerous times. My greatest impact is sitting around with a cup of coffee with 1 or 2 people. Because it's built out of relationship. It's not built out of, well, I'm the senator from Minnesota. See, I wouldn't deal well with that. I know what it's like when I get power. It's not good. So, okay. Yeah. We got 2 short ones. I made an executive decision. I think we're going to skip Islam. And we're gonna go into secular humanism next week. We'll finish these two. These are real quick. We'll finish that, and we'll do secular humanism next week, and then we'll do Marxist-Leninism, which is communist socialism stuff, and then we'll finish up with spiritualism and then postmodernism. But we'll skip Islam. All right? Okay, Lord, thanks for this night. Bless these people. Give them wisdom and courage and boldness to share their lives with people, I pray. Amen.